Hello, everybody, and welcome to Specimens. My name is Elle, and I am the host of this podcast where we talk all things science, conservation, and specimens. Happy New Year! This is the first episode of 2023. There's been a 2-month hiatus since the last episode went out, so I hope you are as ready and waiting as I was to open my laptop today and get editing. I want to tell you about today's episode. It is with Arachnologist T. Francis. Now, if you're immediately thinking, this is not the episode for me, I urge you to just stick with it. In 1 hour, T has taught me more about spiders than I ever knew in my life. Not only is she a phenomenal science communicator, she was extremely patient with all of my questions, and I truly believe that you are going to have your entire perceptions changed about spiders. And if you wait till the end, there's a confession from me. T, I am thrilled to be speaking with you. Thank you for giving up your time to speak with me today. How are you and where are you?
I'm doing great, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. I am sat in my basement studio at home in Hertfordshire, surrounded by stuff and not what I'd usually be surrounded by, but we'll make it work.
Okay, awesome. Well, you can tell me exactly what little creatures you're surrounded by at the moment later in the episode. But before we do that, I would love if you could take me right back to the beginning and tell me a little bit about where your love of spiders began.
It's been a lifelong thing, definitely. I feel like I say this every time anyone asks me this question, and it never fails to make me laugh. When most kids are really little and they have like an imaginary friend, I had an imaginary pet spider called Cyril who lived in the bath. And yeah, so that was the thing. And I don't know. It's strange because nobody in my family has ever had like a particular affinity for them. In fact, my auntie, who I'm very close to and always have been, is very arachnophobic. So it would stand to reason that I would perhaps pick up some of that from her, because I believe very much that phobias of spiders and other creatures are inherited and sort of picked up from contact with people who show certain behaviours, early on. So it would stand to reason that I would be afraid of them because of that, but I never was. I think, it's just I've always felt very comfortable around them. I've always been fascinated by them, and as a child, I've always been really, really interested in the natural world, animals, everything, like fossils, like all sorts of stuff, anything I could get my hands on that I could sort of look at up close and sort of get really engrossed in. I loved, so spiders and other bugs and stuff that I'd find in the garden, I just thought were just so cool, to a child's mind. They're like the tiny animals. They obviously are tiny animals, but it's like I'm used to seeing things like lions and tigers in my books, but I go out in the garden and I've got like this tiny little world of all these really cool animals, and I could watch them up close, so I was just like really, really sort of fascinated by that, and it's stuck with me forever.
Yeah, T, and I wonder if that speaks to how the big five are always glamorized in mainstream media and in wildlife documentaries. I definitely feel like from my own observations, insects seem to be secondary most of the time, and they're not really given the spotlight in the same way as some of the large mammals. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I have a feeling I'm probably going to get into some more depth about as we talk more.
Okay, cool. Well, I know this is going to be a great episode because there is just so much for us to talk about. But let me just go back a step before we kind of get to that. So you have this love of spiders. When does this translate into something a little bit more concrete, whether that be academically or professionally? How does that transition into something else?
I think just the desire to understand as much as I possibly can about what it is I'm interested in. Perhaps, obviously I'm very candid about the fact that I'm neurodivergent. I'm on the autism spectrum, and I've always had this kind of like intense need to learn as much as I possibly can about the things that I'm interested in, which I suppose a lot of people would refer to as a hyperfixation. And it's always been like that. So I'm also really big into plants, so I study everything I possibly can about the things that I'm interested in. If I'm keeping them around me, I want to make sure I know as much as I can about their care. I want to make sure I don't get anything wrong. I want to know as much as I can about why they do the things they do, why they grow in the places they grow, why they live in the places they live, all of these things. So the curiosity and the need to sort of learn as much as I can is at the root of everything. And that is why I ended up going to university to do my degree, which was in animal biology and ecology. I wasn't planning on doing that originally. I was planning to go to art school and to pursue a career as an artist, which I did anyway. But I went and got my degree in biology because I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could about the natural world, you know?
Well, T, I think there's something to be said for your hyperfixation, because in today's world, we have such short attention spans, and the ability to fixate on something with a desire to learn, I think is really beautiful. And I think you would probably make a really fantastic dinner party guest because you know a lot about a subject, whereas a lot of other people probably know a little about a lot. Does that make sense?
But then I get shot in the foot there as well, because with the autism thing, being at dinner parties freaks me out and I need to leave. So, actually, that's not strictly true. That's not strictly true. I just thought it was funny. But
T, if it's any consolation, being a taxidermist at a dinner party definitely is a unique situation in itself, but it's not about me. However, I will just note that taxidermy is something that we are going to talk about later in the conversation. Okay, but back to what we were talking about. So you studied animal biology and ecology.
Yes.
At what point did this move into what you do today in the world in which you live in, where your spider advocacy is your kind of primary lead?
This is interesting, actually, because I left university. I graduated in 2008 and more or less immediately threw myself into a career as a self-employed artist. Not for any reason, there was no reason when I came out of my degree. It wasn't like I was turning my back on it. It wasn't like I'd had enough. It was just more that I didn't really feel like there was a whole lot of career guidance in my particular course, and nothing that I did during that degree course really vibed with me. I didn't study spiders specifically as part of that. It was very sort of general. It was more, the expectation is that if you continue on to masters and perhaps eventual PhD, that's when you start to specialize. So there wasn't really any specialism when I was at uni. So what I felt driven to do when I graduated was explore my creativity and see how I could apply that. That led me down the path of becoming, I originally started making jewelry. I injured myself. I was working at a cafe for a while and I injured my arm and I couldn't use my tools for a while. So I ended up illustrating while I was sort of recuperating from that injury. And that just kind of naturally became the number one thing I was doing. I found that actually illustration I'm good at it and I enjoy it. So we'll see where this goes. And a lot of people started taking a lot of interest in the work that I was putting out. So I was like, this is cool. This was also round about the inception of Instagram. So, Instagram was like this new platform where I could share all my work. And it was, anyway, I'm digressing massively. That continued for like 10 years. Fast forward to say like 2018, thereabouts, I started to burn out from it all. I'd started tattooing professionally. I'd been sort of taken off on this whirlwind path of becoming this professional artist and doing all these things that I felt were expected of me. And one day I sat back and I was like, yeah, okay, people expect this, but I don't want this. This isn't what I want to be doing. So I stopped. I took a step back. I was like, right, I need to reassess. And then 2019, I started thinking about returning to my studies, returning to academia, doing my master's, doing my PhD. All throughout this period, I've had exotic pets in the background, including a lot of spiders. Been very interested in keeping them and watching them, drawing them, all this. And I realized that actually this is an area that I've been naturally very interested in all my life. I'd like to perhaps dedicate a bit more of myself to learning more about it, understanding more about it, perhaps helping other people with, keeping spiders, or whether they're perhaps arachnophobic, understanding more about spiders, this kind of thing. So then fast forward a little bit more, pandemic happens, and all of these plans that I had to start looking at applying to do my master's and my PhD got kind of put on temporary hold, because I was like, I don't know what the future of university study is going to look like, given lockdowns and social distancing and all that. I was like, I'm gonna shelve this for a little while, but I want to make sure that when the time comes that I do want to apply to go back, my application is bulletproof. So I'm going to use all this time to throw myself into as much stuff as I can get my hands on, working in the field of arachnology and just learning as much as I could. So I was using Twitter quite a lot, which is an absolutely fantastic networking tool for scientists and anybody involved in whether it's arachnology or science as a broader field. It's just really great for connecting with other people who are interested in or active in the same fields that you are. So through networking with a lot of people there, I found quite a few opportunities to do things like voluntary work for a couple of arachnological societies, both in the UK and elsewhere, working with scientists in labs in various different parts of the world who were doing things like behavioral ecology, taxonomy, all that kind of stuff. Taxonomy is my sort of main focus, like the classification of species is like my big interest. And there's quite a lot of work to be done on that in the field of arachnology, spiders, you know. So I wanted to focus as much as I could on that. And I think as time's gone on and as the pandemic has evolved and become what it is now, I'm not feeling any mad urgency to go back to that application and to send it in and to go off to university, because I've found so many things to get involved in the meantime, and so many ways to contribute to the field without having to go and do all of that and put myself in heaps more debt and, you know, commit to years and years of university study. Like, I've found ways of doing it um, without having to do all of that, and I can be involved in it now, you know? So that's what I've been doing, and that's how I've ended up where I am now in my basement.
T, you have given me a little bit of information about spider care and the keeping of exotic animals, but I'd actually love to draw back a little bit and talk about people first before we go down kind of biological route, and you tell me a little bit more about their anatomy and animal behavior and all the rest of that. I want to talk about public perceptions. I want to talk about the immediate uncanny reaction that people seem to have when spiders get mentioned. So where are those fears coming from? Where are those inaccuracies being drawn from? And also giving you the opportunity to advocate for spiders and how brilliant they are. What are the major inaccuracies that you need to dispel before we get into looking at a kind of macro lens, anatomical, biological viewpoint of these spiders?
A, how long have we got? And B, are you sure you want to wade into that mire of absolute filth? So, okay, it's no secret to anybody who lives on planet Earth that spiders are much maligned. They are used as a tool by the media, pop culture, you know, literature, music, everything, to portray a kind of mood or a vibe of creepiness and darkness and something bad. They're very seldom does a spider pop up when somebody wants to create a happy, lively, colourful, vibrant mood, you know? So there are reasons for that. There are sort of logical reasons for that. You know, a lot of spiders that we commonly encounter in our homes, around our homes, they inhabit dark, dingy little cracks and crevices because that's where they tend to find their food. But then, you know, when you go out into rainforests or into, you know, meadows, anywhere where there's lots of flowers, then you start to find completely different types of spiders that people aren't really aware of existing. Really brightly coloured flower crab spiders that can be pink, they could be yellow, they can be all these different colours. There's a whole rainbow of them out there that people don't know about. So people tend to think more about these black, brown kind of I hate to use the word creepy about the creatures that I love so much, but you know, that's what we'll go with because that's what people understand, you know, these creepy creatures. And so people are just inherently suspicious of them because of that being sort of drummed into them from so early on. Now, a lot of people like to sort of tout this idea of spider phobia, arachnophobia, being an innate response to something inbuilt in humanity that we have no control over. I don't buy that at all. And my reason for that is rooted in the fact that of the 50 odd thousand species of spider in the world, a minute fraction of them are capable of killing a human being. A slightly larger percentage have what's considered medically significant venom, so it can cause some unpleasant symptoms, and it might sort of lay you out for a few days if you get a bad bite, might have some nasty physical symptoms if you get a bad bite, but it's not going to kill you. Because of that, because of the sort of minute likelihood of ever actually coming into any mortal danger because of a spider, I don't believe that that's enough of a threat for us to have such a strong inbuilt innate fear response, you know. So I don't give that much credence at all. I think it is societal and inherited. You know, society created this monster, and uses it over and over again to create an atmosphere that it wants to create, or to purposefully malign it for whatever reason. See it a lot in the media. On a slow news day, newspapers will be running all these massively sensationalized stories about deadly false widows sweeping the UK. It's like, just shut up. Um, but you know, that kind of thing, people resonate with it because it gives them that sort of, I guess it's like an endorphin rush or a dopamine kick or whatever. You know, it's like, you know, something to get excited about reading in the paper. It's, oh, it's so spooky, it's so scary. It's not real, you know, but they're telling you it is. And so a lot of people believe that it is. And so they will then become afraid of something that they don't need to be afraid of. And then their children will see them jumping whenever they see it, or see them sort of treating something with a lot of caution or a lot of disgust. And they will then, you know, absorb that themselves. And so you see how we have this domino effect of people just being afraid of something that is so not what people think it is at all. It is, especially in the UK, completely harmless. So, you know, it's just very, very deeply ingrained in our culture. Not just our culture, but like, you know, our culture in the West. It's cultural. They pop up in cultures all over the world in different guises, in different sort of ways. Like there are mythical like creatures that are spider based. There are spider gods in different cultures. A lot of them are revered for some reasons, a lot of them are feared for others. You know, there's a whole lot of spider lore out there in sort of, you know, human history. So there are a lot of ideas about them and what they are and what they do and what they're capable of, what they represent. And it just kind of all like amalgamates into this kind of entire, like, I'm going to use the word vibe. this vibe of just like kind of mysterious, kind of a little bit sinister, kind of a little bit spooky, you know. And that's hard work to try and counter that when it's so deeply ingrained in culture and, you know, in people individually. It's really, really hard work to try and counter that. But that is the crux of everything that I do. It's not just for my own personal interest. The science communication element is to try and get people to see them differently, to show them a little bit more consideration, a little bit more respect, because they are so unbelievably important to everything, you know?
Yes, and I think that's a really great place to dovetail into their role in the ecosystem and the wider lens of the importance of spiders. So take us a little deeper towards understanding the function of a spider and their place in that ecosystem. I feel as though if we can truly understand their place in biodiversity, then maybe people will start to feel a little bit more compassionate. So what are their primary roles and functions, and how do they exercise those?
So to break it down into super basic, like general terms, the best way to look at spiders and their role in the ecosystem is as basically pest and disease control. So, and also they provide food for other organisms. So like anybody who's familiar with, you know, the food chain and sort of, you know, the circle of life, all that kind of stuff as a concept, knows that, you know, every organism, every living creature has its own place in those systems, in those uh, words. I don't have any words in those cycles. You know, I know, right? Every organism has its place in those cycles, in those systems. And the spider's place is it hunts certain organisms, and a lot of those organisms that it hunts have effects on our environment, on the environment on the whole. So a lot of the insects and indeed other creatures that they eat may be viewed by us as pests, whether it be household pests or agricultural pests. Spiders keeping those numbers under control mean that in terms of agriculture, we don't have so much strain on our crops. We don't have so many pests decimating our crops because we've got a whole army of spiders out there fighting in our corner, taking care of them for us, and we really owe it to them to say thank you every now and then and not smash them when we see them in our house. I have feelings about this. And disease control, it's the same thing. So, mosquitoes, for example, spiders will eat tons of mosquitoes. We all know what mosquitoes can do to us and to other creatures. So, they keep the numbers of disease vectors under control, and they keep the numbers of pests under control. And in turn, they provide food to other organisms such as birds and small mammals, other arthropods, who also have a role in doing those same things. So if you remove a huge, great big part of a machine that is responsible for, running this entire sort of thing, it's not going to work very well anymore. And you're probably going to find that the entire machine crumbles and collapses because you've taken away a crucial component. Spiders are one of those crucial components. Everything in an ecosystem is crucial. But, on a global scale, we've got spiders in all kinds of different ecosystems, and every single one of them fulfills just as important a role as the next one, and as every other organism in that same ecosystem. So just because we don't like it, or just because we're a bit weirded out by it, doesn't mean it doesn't have a hugely important role to play in nature. And we are, whether we like it or not, always going to be a part of nature.
Oh, T, you really are so good. You are a true naturalist. Okay, so what are the variable methods that a spider will use to predate? So obviously we know about the web, but within this kind of predation umbrella, what kinds of designs are there? And are there different defense mechanisms? If they're being predated on, do they get predated on? Talk to us about that.
There are so many different ways that a spider, or that spiders, hunt and defend themselves. And it's just the diversity in the whole spider world is absolutely unbelievable. So spiders are we can get into a bit of taxonomy now, or we can get into a bit of taxonomy later. I feel like if I do a quick little sort of, I don't know, crash course in it now, it might help understand. So I know we were going to cover this at some point, and I realize I've just completely jumped the gun, but it helps me. It helps me. Oh, I think I've lost your sound. Oh, I can hear you now. Yeah, I don't know. It went really quiet for a second there. Okay. Yeah, it helps. The whole taxonomy sort of crash course will help me explain the diversity element of spiders a little bit better. So, for anybody listening who is completely unfamiliar with taxonomy and what it is, it's the classification of living organisms. So every living organism is given a name, and that name is arrived at via sort of classifying it into this system, which is taxonomy, phylogeny. And you can think of it like a tree. So they do actually refer to it as, the phylogenetic tree for a reason. It starts off with life. Our trunk is life, and then that trunk splits into 3 different domains, and then those domains then split into kingdoms, and then those kingdoms split into phylums, and there's all these fancy terms for what these things are. And it starts off, like I said, life is then divided into different types of organisms. So we've got bacteria, we've got single-celled organisms, we've got multicellular organisms. Then we've got kingdoms, which is how we then further group those different domains, like how we categorize them further. So the more branches there are to this tree, the more we sort of move into things like, so if we look at phylums, for example, the phylum Arthropoda contains all of our insects, spiders, invertebrates. In that phylum, there are subphylums. Our subphylum of interest is called Chelicerata, so that contains spiders. Some creatures like horseshoe crabs are in Chelicerata. There's not just spiders, but like all arachnids, which takes us on to our next level, which is class. This is where we have class Arachnida. And in class Arachnida, we then have several orders. So the orders are all of our arachnids. Now, arachnids, obviously, we know spiders are arachnids, but we also have scorpions, they're arachnids. Mites are arachnids. Harvestmen are arachnids. They're not actually spiders, they're arachnids, but not. They're in a different order. There's lots of different types of arachnid, and they've all got their own order. So to talk about spiders, we'll be looking at the order Araneae, which is then split into infraorders. I hope I'm not confusing anybody too much. I probably am. Very sorry about that. Infraorders in Araneae, we've got Araneomorphi, which are commonly called true spiders, and Mygalomorphi. Mygalomorphi is the group that tarantulas are in. Tarantulas and other kind of primitive type spiders are in Mygalomorphi. And then we've got Araneomorphi, which is what we're probably going to be focusing on most today. So pretty much every single spider that you encounter in the UK, with the exception of one species that people don't tend to encounter very often, come from the infraorder Araneomorphi, the true spiders. So your orb weavers that you see in the middle of their big round webs in the garden, the house spiders that you see running around in the late summer, early autumn, the spindly little cellar spiders that you'll see hanging out up in corners in your rooms. These are all different types of Araneomorph spiders, true spiders. So then those infraorders, and indeed those infraorders are then further split into families. Families are split into genera, and then genera contain the specific, like the species of spiders. So every single spider, every single living organism has a generic name that denotes its genus, and then a specific name that denotes its species. So, for example, the cellar spiders, the spindly ones, the generic name is Fulcus, and the species name is Phalangioides. So a scientific name that is arrived at via this taxonomic system is Fulcus phalangioides. That tells us exactly what this species is. There's not a single other one that can be called that, so that's how we know that's exactly what that is. So, Taxonomy 101, there you go. Thank you very much.
Okay, quick pause. During recording, the sound system that I use to record this podcast just decided to not, which is quite frankly rude because I think my sound system doesn't like spiders, but really it's probably just because I've overloaded it by recording 40 episodes on this tiny laptop. Now, sadly, it's January the 6th. This episode was recorded in October of 2022. So when I was trying to fill in the gaps of the question that I asked T in order to get her wonderful answer, I could not recollect. However, she goes on to talk a little bit about spider sound, and she says, which you're about to hear, you said spiders don't make sound. So I presume in responding to her question, I was asking her something about spiders and maybe the attributes that they have that makes them either a true spider or a not true spider. And I might have mentioned in my complete inaccuracy about knowing anything about spiders, about whether or not they are completely silent or not. Anyway, I really do apologize. This hasn't happened before. I'm going to let T take you through the next answer and hopefully it will all make sense. She's a very, very good educator, so I'm sure you'll quickly learn. But if you do have any questions, reach out. I'm sure T will be more than happy to fill in the blanks.
To backtrack slightly, when you said about spiders not making sound, that's not strictly true. There are some spiders that can make sound. They make sound in a very similar way to crickets and grasshoppers. It's called stridulation. And they do it by the stridulation is basically, to break it right down, is like the rubbing of hairs. They've got these stridulatory organs, which are basically their bristly hairs, and they can rub them together and make this sound. And some tarantula species are able to make like quite a loud hissing sound, which is quite alarming when they're doing it at you in your house. But yes, so not all spiders, just some. So yeah. Yeah, really threatening. You're probably never going to sleep again. ASMR. I think that probably defeats the purpose. But so the reason the taxonomy came into this is because now we're going to start talking about the diversity of spiders and how many different types of prey capture mechanisms there are. Some of them use silk, some of them don't. Some of them rely entirely on silk in order to catch their prey. Some of them barely use it at all. Certainly not in prey capture. Some spiders have incredibly keen eyesight, so they're able to hunt visually. Some have no eyes at all, so they can't see, so they have to rely on other sensory sort of methods to figure out what's going on around them and to be able to hunt. Silk is an extension of the spider itself in a lot of ways, in that a lot of spiders that don't have very good eyesight use it as a way of not only hunting, but also keeping themselves safe. they use it to sense vibrations in the environment around them, movement, air movement, all that kind of stuff. So they can sense when things are coming. They can sense when things are, prey. They can sense when things are predators. They can sense when things are just, normal sort of ambient wind movement, that kind of stuff. It's not just the silk that allows them to do that, but they have hairs all over their bodies that are extremely sensitive to movement too. So they're able to use those as a way of kind of further enhancing their ability to feel out what's going on around them. So to go back to the silk thing for a second, like the way spiders use silk. So we're probably all familiar with the big round webs that you see in your garden, the orb webs they're called. It's essentially a big net. The spider makes this great big round net, sits in the middle of it, waits for something to fly into it, and then when they feel something collide with the web and start vibrating, trying to leave, they'll go over there, check out whether it's something they want to eat, and if it is, they start trussing it up in silk. They'll deliver a bite, which they inject some of their venom. That will then subdue their prey, and then they'll come back to it and they'll start eating it. So we know about how they use it in that way. Some spiders have a different sort of structure of silk. We'll say there are two different types of silk structure that we can talk about. So we've got cribballate silk and ecribballate silk. An orb web is largely made of ecribballate silk. Cribballate silk is silk that is spun through a particular organ that certain types of spider have, called a cribellum, which is essentially like a big sieve. It's like a plate with loads of little tiny holes in it. So rather than one strand of silk coming out, thousands of tiny, super, super fine strands come out. That then ends up being like quite, in a lot of cases, being backcombed by a complementary piece of apparatus that cribballate spiders have called a calamistrum. Calamistrum is like a comb-like line of bristles on their rearmost pair of legs. They use that to comb this silk, and basically, rather than the silk being sticky, like glue kind of sticky, like we're used to those big orb webs being, this is sticky in more of a kind of like electromagnetic sense. It's like Velcro, so it's it's kind of like static electricity, like your hair kind of being attracted to a balloon. It kind of works a little bit like that, but also it's just super fine Velcro-y. If you're an insect with like spiky bits on your legs and little claws and stuff, you ain't getting out of that. So the more you struggle, the more you're going to get trussed up in it. So that's another type of silk. So cribballate silk is employed by lots of different types of spiders, including one that I absolutely love and I'm obsessed with, the net casting spiders. So net casting spiders spin their silk, their cribballate silk, into a net. They make a net out of it. And when I say a net, I mean like, think of a fisherman with a casting net, like the nets that they throw out into the sea and then drag back in again full of fish. It's like that. But because this cribballate silk, because of the structure of it, it's really like elastic. So when they're hunting, what they do is they'll spin a couple of support lines from like, I don't know, bushes or twigs or whatever, wherever they are. They'll suspend themselves from those support lines using their rear forelegs, and then their front forelegs, they hold four corners of this net out in front of them. And when something passes by within range, they reach forward, they strike at this with this net, and they stretch it right out to the full extent that their legs will allow and grab the prey with it. And then it's just like it's caught up in all of this Velcro-y cribballate silk net thing. And it's amazing. I've kept them. They're absolutely incredible spiders to watch and to be around. They're amazing. They've got a rather unflattering common name, ogre-faced spiders, because they've got these really big forward-facing googly eyes at the front. Quite a lot of them have like little eyebrows like over the top of them, and they just look a bit kind of gawky, sort of like, yeah. We call them net casting spiders. That's much nicer. But there have been studies that suggest that there is another element to their prey capture technique, which is just amazing. If I'm not sure if it's been 100% verified yet, I really should check up on that. But it has been observed that they will use their own poop, which is white, as like a marker on the ground or on whatever near where they are, which they use as like a depth perception tool. So they will position themselves above their little poop marker, and if something passes over the top of it and like blocks it for a second, they know it's within range, so they can strike and grab with their net. So they've got very keen eyesight, these ones. These are some of the like big-eyed spiders that have got like a complex eye, not dissimilar to ours in its structure, obviously dissimilar to ours and how it looks, and how they can't move their eyes like we can, but the way it works, the way it receives information is kind of similar. So yeah, they're really cool. Other spiders with big eyes that are able to see very well and hunt visually are wolf spiders and jumping spiders. So neither of them use their silk as like a tool for hunting with. Sometimes they'll use it as a safety line. Jumping spiders, particularly if they're leaping into the unknown, they'll anchor themselves with a bit of silk in case it goes wrong. But they don't use silk as like a prey capture tool. They ambush. They'll actively hunt. They'll go out looking for prey, and they will ambush their prey when they find it. Yeah, so there's that.
It's truly remarkable listening to you speak, T, and especially just then, because what you're saying about the behavior sort of indicates to me that there's a far greater cognitive system that's at play, way beyond what I might have ever imagined spiders to have. I wondered if you could talk to me a little bit more about what we know to be true about spiders and their memory and their brains and their cognitive systems.
Yeah. I think a lot of people assume that spiders and other arthropods, like invertebrates, are just robotic. They act on like innate sort of inbuilt responses to their environment, and there really isn't anything else going on there. And it's a topic that is still hotly debated, even in the scientific community. Like, how aware of their surroundings are they? How much do they actually cognize? How much thought actually goes into things? How much like mental activity is there, for want of a better term? And more discoveries are being made every day that kind of point us more in the direction of there's a lot more going on there than we thought. A recent study that comes to mind when I think about this, and I mean really recent, like last few months, I saw it announced on Twitter. People have been, like scientists have been observing spiders in their sleep, and there's reason for them to believe that they're dreaming, because they're able, like, so it started out, it's jumping spiders. Jumping spiders are quite often studied because they show a lot of behaviors that spiders, we don't see in a lot of spiders. A lot of what comes across to us, perhaps it's anthropomorphisation, I don't know, but it comes across as intelligence, as awareness, so they're quite interesting to study. There's also, they're the largest family of spiders is the jumping spider. So there's a hell of a lot of them, a hell of a lot of diversity in that family for people to study. So they make a very good group of spiders to study. And people who had been studying them noticed that some of these spiders, while they were at rest, were twitching, not unlike a dog does in its sleep, or like people do. Now, not all jumping spiders are, you can't get this with all jumping spiders, but some, particularly juveniles, when they're very young and they've got a bit of translucency to their exoskeleton, you can see how their eyes move. So like I said earlier, their eyes don't move like ours do, but their retina, or like some of the components inside their eyes, move. And when there's a certain amount of transparency or translucency to their exoskeleton, you can actually see that happening. So they were observing these spiders while they were sort of twitching in their sleep, and they noticed the eyes were moving, which is very, very reminiscent of REM, rapid eye movement sleep in mammals. So they're like, hold on a minute, what does this mean? If they're dreaming, what are they dreaming about? Like, do they remember things? Like, it opens up a whole new world of things to sort of look into and to discover. So I don't believe that they are just robotic. There is certainly an amount of cognitive something going on there. Now, as a taxonomist, or somebody who's primarily interested in taxonomy, behavioral ecology and the behavior of spiders is not something that I study personally. It's something I've obviously got a keen interest in, but there are people out there who study this who are far better qualified than I am to go into the nitty-gritty of like what these studies are actually suggesting and what they're showing us. But certainly, just on the base level, it's food for thought. And I like to think that if people can get, can have access to the knowledge that, we are now wondering if spiders are dreaming when they're asleep, that they're going to have a little bit more pause to sort of think about what it is that they're considering killing with a shoe. It's not just something in your room or in your house that's not thinking about things, or interacting with its environment. It's just there and you don't like it, therefore kill it. It's not going to cause any problems. I want people to think of them a bit differently to that, which is why I do what I do. So
Okay, so T, because we're talking about spiders at home, and obviously most people will have spiders at home, can you draw parallels or make distinctions between spiders as pets and spiders in your home? Can they ever even be pets? Are yours pets? And what do you feel about the kind of ethics surrounding the pet trade of exotic animals specifically? Because I know spiders, there are a whole host of incredibly beautiful exotic variations, and I just wondered if you had feelings on that.
I have feelings. I have feelings on this issue. So like, yeah, I do believe that spiders can make good pets. It depends. It depends on what you want in a pet. I don't view my spiders as pets. Like I don't think of them as pets because I just personally, this is strictly personal preference. I've just got a bit of a problem with the word pet. Like it just seems really patronizing and like, you know, and I don't know, just I kind of don't mind using it so much when it comes to like cats and dogs and stuff because it's just a colloquial thing. Like we all just refer to them as pets. But when it comes to spiders, like I, I don't interact with them the same way as I interact with my cats and dogs. I don't really interact with them at all, quite honestly, because they don't get anything out of it. And I have them because I like to observe them. I don't necessarily need to have them on my hand in order to do that. And I feel that sometimes it's an unnecessary risk to the spider to do so. So my personal preference is I take a very hands-off approach to my spider keeping. I've also dialed it back a lot. Like if we'd been doing this podcast interview 2.5 years ago, I'd be sitting in a room with 2,000 spiders behind me. And I'm not joking. Now I have 30 spiders in my bedroom and I'm like, I've got so few spiders. 30 spiders is nothing. And people are like, 30 spiders, are you mad? But so, but yeah, so like, I think anyone who's unsure about uh, what kind of pet a spider can make, only needs to go on the internet, on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or whatever, and search pet jumping spider and see what people are filming their jumping spiders doing and what kind of pets they make. If you are living somewhere that doesn't allow you to have a traditional pet, like a cat or a dog or a bird or whatever, but you want to have something around that you can watch and sort of, enjoy, and something that's not going to take up a whole load of space, like perhaps you're a student and you've just got like a dorm room with like a shelf or whatever, they're perfect. They're absolutely perfect. They don't require loads of room. You can have one in just like a small plastic enclosure with decent ventilation and make sure it's got everything it needs, all the furniture it needs, stuff to climb on, stuff to spin its web, blah, blah, blah. They make great pets to observe and to just sort of have something to come home to and just like watch and enjoy. And there is a certain amount of interaction that can be had there as well with jumping spiders. They will acclimatize to sort of, having a human around and being handled a bit, so there are people who feel that, now when they open their spider's enclosure and they put their hand in, it might even hop onto their hand. Maybe it's doing that for spider reasons that they don't understand. Maybe it's doing it because, oh my God, it's my dad. I'm so happy to see him. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. If you're keeping a jumping spider as a pet and you're looking after it and you're getting pleasure from having it around, anthropomorphize as much as you want. Like I'm not a fan of anthropomorphizing things. It's harmful in a lot of cases, but I find it's an incredibly useful tool when it comes to getting people on board with spiders. So if you're not sure what kind of pet a spider can be and how much entertainment you can get from a spider pet, go and have a look at some jumping spider pet videos. Tarantulas, we all know about people keeping tarantulas. Most of the spiders I have at the moment are tarantulas. They're a completely different thing. They're essentially a hairy pet rock in a lot of cases. They don't do a whole lot. They can be very interesting to watch at feeding time. They can be very interesting to watch when they molt. They can be very interesting to watch if they're kind of tarantula that spins a lot of silk. But a lot of them do just sit around doing a sum total of nothing for months on end. Some of them will even dig themselves a burrow and disappear into it. And it's like, bye, see you in 6 months. You've basically got pet enclosure. So I can understand people being a bit sort of, like, why do you even have those? For me, it's because I think they're beautiful. And, I'm a night owl. I'm up in the middle of the night quite often. That's when they're out. They're not out during the day. They don't care about what you're doing during the day. But if you get up and flick your torch on and have a little look, see what's going on, they're out. They're out and they're doing things. And it's fun, It's like I enjoy that. But I don't actively participate in the spider pet scene anymore because it's problematic in the same way that a lot of the exotic animal trade is problematic. And I don't wish to play an active part in that anymore by giving my money to it. The spiders that I have are extremely long lived. So I'm going to have them for quite a long time. So I don't really need to go out and get anything else at the moment. I will take in spiders that have arrived in the country by accident. So sometimes you have people who work in garden centres or florists or, supermarkets who'll find something that's stowed away that's got over here that shouldn't have got here. I'll take them on and I'll keep them and I'll give them a good home. And I'm perfectly happy to do that. But other than that, I don't really bring any exotic spiders home anymore because of all of the reasons I've just mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think coming from an arachnologist, that's very important and useful information for people that might be thinking about it themselves but feel perhaps conflicted. Going back to biodiversity a little bit, what is happening to spiders as a result of general disinterest in the public domain? And I imagine very few, although please correct me if I'm wrong, spider advocates like yourself. Are we seeing extinctions at the foundation level of our ecosystem, or any other huge notable changes for spiders as a result of perhaps insect decimation and habitat loss? Talk to me about conservation and how spiders have been affected.
I can only recall one instance in recent times where a spider has actually come up on the radar of, conservation issues or extinction issues, and that in itself is the problem. So spider conservation is massively under discussed. We've got organizations and lists out there like the ICUN Redlist that lists all of the various threatened species in the world. There are, at the time that I got this information, and I'm sure it's more now, there's 134, 135,000 species on the red list, but only 300 out of those are spiders. We don't do enough to understand how they're faring in the world at the moment, in terms of the climate crisis, in terms of extinction of, sort of mass loss of insects and like arthropod species. Like, we don't do enough to understand how spiders are faring. And the reason is apathy, because of everything we discussed at the beginning of this podcast, this general kind of like lack of care for something that a lot of people view as an inconvenience and something that they'd really rather not have around. There just isn't the interest or the care enough to sort of go out there and actually understand like how they're doing. And going back to what I said then, considering they are such a crucial part of any ecosystem, it makes sense that we should be doing more to understand what kind of problems they're facing. Now, the case that I mentioned a second ago of, a spider actually coming up in recent discussions, a couple of years ago when Australia was on fire, there were forest fires, sort of, decimating entire ecosystems that only exist in, one particular area. Now, I don't have the notes in front of me, so I might get this wrong, and I'm really sorry if I do. I think it was Kangaroo Island. I'm not sure. I think it was Kangaroo Island, but there was a species of spider that is endemic to that area, a species of assassin spider, also known as a pelican spider. If you Google it, you'll see why. It looks like a pelican. It's super cool. But they're really, really tiny, and they occupy the leaf litter on forest floors. And this particular species was only recorded in a forest that had been completely razed to the ground by forest fires when Australia was burning. And there was a lot of concern that we would have lost them. I looked into it a few months ago, and they have been found. Some juveniles were found, so that suggests that there has been breeding activity, which is absolutely fantastic news because it means that they're still there, pardon the pun, hanging on by a thread. But they are they are there. That's the only time that I can think, with exception of discussions regarding the pet trade, it's the only time I can think of spiders coming up organically in a discussion about, habitat loss or disasters and the effect that they have on, biodiversity, all that kind of thing. The pet trade discussion comes up quite a lot because, obviously you've got poaching animals from the wild to enter the pet trade. You've got a lot of species of spiders that originate in South America that have been taken from the wild to such an extent that it is having a big impact on their numbers, not just South America, but like also in Asia as well. One of our more iconic tarantula species, the Guti ornamental, Poecilotheria Metallica, that's been collected from the wild a lot, and its wild population is like threatened. It's not a good way. It's everywhere in the hobby, but it's not doing so well in the wild. And there are people who are like, oh well, it's important that we keep them in the hobby because blah blah blah, and it is, but there are people whose breeding practices are not exactly the best, so you don't know that they are actually preserving what is natural to the wild. And I'm not just referring to the Poecilotheria species here. I'm talking about all kinds of things. There are hybrids showing up all over the place in the pet trade, which are useless to conservation efforts. So when people use the pet trade as, sort of the argument, oh, the pet trade's crucial to the conservation of blah, blah, blah. No, a lot of the time it's an actual problem in many ways to that. So it does come up when the pet trade is mentioned. But other than that, it's, its underrepresentation is an obstacle to protection of creatures such as spiders. And because there aren't so many people out there finding out exactly how they're doing, we don't really know. So it could be catastrophic for all we know, but we haven't found out yet. We probably will when it's too late.
Yeah, I wonder if just in listening to you there, your industry is anything like my industry, which is kind of small. Everyone sort of knows everyone by name. Gossip circulates very fast, and everyone's peppered across the globe. So your nearest spider scientist might be in another continent. I feel like there are probably a lot of similarities in the kind of nicheness of what you do to what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely very much like your industry. There are a few sort of like diehard scientists who are committed to the spider life, who are all about it, sort of, eat, sleep and breathe spiders. And, the community is pretty small, so a lot of people do know each other. It's like I'm in contact with a lot of people who've done a lot of amazing work in the field of arachnology, and I quite often find myself suffering from imposter syndrome and wondering how the hell did I end up talking to these people, because they're like spider world heavyweights. And it's amazing because these are the kind of people who, when I'd be reading about spiders, in books or whatever when I was younger, these are the people who were writing them, so now to be talking to them on social media, particularly Twitter, and interacting with them and working with them and collaborating with them, is pretty huge. But yeah, it's a pretty sort of small community of people. There are a lot of people who are interested in it and active in a more sort of like I guess passive way, but the sort of like the core kind of people who are very very active and contribute a lot to it, it's quite a small circuit. Yeah.
Well, T, I have no doubt that you are an absolutely crucial piece to that puzzle. Just talking to you today has been such an education, and you truly do know exactly what you're talking about.
Thank you.
I know that you have so much more to say about spiders, but I also know that you do so much other work. So amongst being a remarkable spider advocate, you're also an illustrator, you're a photographer, you're an artist, and a taxidermist. So how have you seen these roles combine your love of spiders, and what does that look like?
So I mean, spiders pop up in pretty much everything I've done. So I being that I have ADHD, I seem to sort of flit from one interest to another, trying to find the ones that I really heavily vibe with. And through doing that, obviously I found my way to spiders, I found my way to illustration, I found my way to like my passions, but I also sort of dip my toe in several other things, and some of them, they sort of recurrently pop up. So, there's the illustration. I was tattooing for a while. I'm a silversmith. I'm a taxidermist. I'm, all these things. And spiders do pop up in pretty much all of it, even in the whole plant thing. Like I mentioned before, I can't remember if it was when we were off air or on, but I'm a big plant enthusiast. I've got a lot of plants. They even play their part in that. So like spiders are literally in every single part of my life. My jewelry work has involved spiders. Illustrations involve spiders. I've tattooed spiders on people. I have spiders tattooed on me. All of these things. I have spiders at some point. I've got spiders living free in my bedroom, keeping tabs on my fungus gnat issue with my plants. Keeping tabs on the pests that might come in on some of the plants. It's like they help me out. So I've got a greenhouse behind me that has tropical plants in it. I've chucked a couple spiders in there just to keep things in check because they love it. It's like a nice environment for them, free food. They do a job for me. I keep them happy. It's a nice little relationship. So, but yeah, like I think the taxidermy, I trained under a museum taxidermist back in 2007 in Wales. And it was only really for myself. Like I didn't really have any ideas of becoming a professional taxidermist. It was something that I was just really curious about because I live really close to Tring Zoological Museum. And Tring was a big deal when I was a kid. It was one of those things. Remember right at the beginning of this conversation, I was saying about how going out into the garden and seeing all these tiny creatures, it was like hands-on contact with nature, because like everything else was just pictures in books. Well, going to Tring and seeing like a polar bear right in front of me or a lion right in front of me was like just fascinating to me. So taxidermy and the fact that it gives you an opportunity to see things up close that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to get very close to and continue to breathe. It was something that I was really very, very interested in and drawn to. So I did that. And it has come up again. It has come up again recently. Like I have been doing taxidermy again recently because it's just something that can't quite leave alone. And, obviously taxidermy deals more with animals that have skin, obviously. But, there is the sort of like entomological specimen scene, and like spider specimens, like preserved arthropod specimens. That's something that I am very interested in. And actually, right behind my laptop screen, I've got a whole load of wet specimens of spiders that, and just here, just off shot here is like my microscope setup where I look at them all, So like, yeah, it all feeds into itself somehow. And spiders are ever present in all of it. So yeah.
I wonder if you ever fall prey, that was a spider pun, to the same pitfalls that taxidermists experience. And because you are a taxidermist, I feel like you're probably experiencing this firsthand, and then that's then communicating into your other disciplines like your illustration. And that is that you are limited by the parameters of science. You know exactly what that specimen looks like. You have live reference material, in your studio.
Definitely.
But therefore, your creativity is somewhat limited by those scientific parameters in a way that other creative disciplines might not have that ceiling. And your ability to communicate science there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Do you experience that?
Yeah, definitely. And also I'm very detail oriented. So like when I'm drawing things or making jewelry, I don't just want to draw what comes to mind as like a spider shape. Like I want to draw what it's actually made of, So I want to get a laser sharp, like clear vision of exactly what this thing is comprised of, so that when I translate it into a piece of art, I'm doing it justice. And I'm not, because I'll look at things and this is just the way I am, and I'm an absolute nightmare to be around a lot of the time. I'll look at a drawing of a spider and be like, oh, that's really nice, except it's got like too many segments in its legs, like amateur, and it's like the person who drew that did a really good job, and they're probably not an arachnologist, so like cut them some slack. But I just, yeah.
I know. It's so frustrating. I definitely think being science-minded can jade your appreciation for creative license somewhat. T, I know from my own personal experiences, as we've talked about today, that people are very quick to judge when they learn about what it is that I do. And it's a knee-jerk reaction to something that they don't understand or that they fear. Do you also experience negative perceptions around your work and advocacy for spiders? And if so, how do you cope with it?
Not trolling so much, but definitely a lot of negativity. And it's a knee-jerk reaction from most people. And a lot of the time, they they have this knee-jerk reaction, and then I come to them with a response and they're like, I'd never thought of it like that, and it's like, okay, there's cogs turning there, they're starting to see it a little bit differently. So usually I'll post a picture of a spider or something, I'll be all excited about it, and then there'll be someone come in with the so original gif of a guy in a like hazmat suit with a fire what is it, flamethrower, it's like, oh, you're definitely the first person to come at me with that gif. I'm like, I'll kill it with fire, or they're disgusting. I'm like, well, it's not, here, look at this one, this is a spider, this is really beautiful. And they're like, oh, actually, no, that's kind of cute, or wow, I didn't know spiders came in those colors, or whatever. So my response to it is, don't lose my temper. I really want to sometimes. I really do want to just be like, what is wrong with you? Why is, like, were you dropped on your head as a child? Like, what? But I don't. Like, I come in and I'm like, hey, they're not all bad. What about this one? And like, try and kill them with kindness, and try and educate them and show them that it's not just, as I said right at the beginning, coming full circle, it's not just that creepy, in inverted commas, brown or black, like hairy thing in the corner of your room. Like, some of them are literally rainbow colored. Some of them are, Lucas the spider, the little, was it a Pixar? No, it wasn't Pixar, but it was a digital animation. Everyone went nuts for Lucas the spider. They were buying plush toys. I'm like, it's a spider, and spiders that look like that do exist. So if you can deal with that one, you can deal with some real ones. And if you can start dealing with some real ones, then you can start dealing with more real ones. And then you can stop killing them. You know what I mean? So I think it's just a case of, yes, there's always going to be people who don't get it, who are a bit negative about it, who've got that knee-jerk response of, what's wrong with you? Why would you like that? Why are you into spiders when kittens exist? I'm like, you can be into both. It's like nobody is saying it's like one or the other. Yeah, so like, it's just a case of trying to be informative and kind and understanding, and just sort of keep in mind that they're acting on impulse a lot of the time, and it's literally all they've ever known is just this negativity surrounding them. And all it's going to take in a lot of cases is one person to shine a different light on it for a couple seconds for them to realize that, oh, hey, actually, you know what, maybe it's not so bad after all. So that's what I try and do.
And T, as we're sort of coming to the end of the episode, there will be people whose perceptions probably have now shifted. So what can people do now to connect with those spiders, especially if they're a little unsure or if they're nervous? Do you have any advice for how we can live harmoniously with these creatures?
Okay, well, first and foremost, knowledge is power. So understanding what you've got in your room or in your house or in your garden, and what it's doing and what it's capable of or not capable of, is going to really help you, because obviously then you're going to know that whatever perceived threat that you may have sort of been aware of before isn't real, like it's not actually there. There are some sort of, again, like knee-jerk responses or like reflex reactions that a lot of people who have arachnophobia have to these things, and it's involuntary. Like it's not something that they have control over. They get that sort of like shivery kind of, oh my god, no, I don't want to look at it kind of response, and like that's not great, but we understand that that's a thing. And so there are sort of more kind of hands-off, gentle approaches that I can suggest to people if they want to start working on their fear and diminishing their fear, but they're not quite ready to go and start reading about spiders and looking at loads of photos of them. My favorite suggestion for people is, the next time you see one, give it a name. So, you might be like in your kitchen and there's one by the cupboard and you're like, oh my god, no, okay, today that's Steve, and Steve has a job and has a family, and Steve has a life, and Steve is a little dude who's doing his best to try and keep things clean and cool for you. Okay, so like, give Steve the benefit of the doubt for a bit, and just like give him a name, and just again, going back to this whole anthropomorphization of animals thing, as a rule, dead against it. But when it comes to combating arachnophobia, we are on board with anthropomorphizing spiders for a while. Now, for people who might not know what that means, anthropomorphizing something means to assign human emotions to it. So animals do not think or behave like humans because they are not humans. But sometimes we'll see them doing something, we're like, oh, that's so cute, he must be doing that because he's afraid or because he loves that other animal or whatever. That's anthropomorphization. We don't know why they're doing it right there and then, but we think of it in a human way. We relate to it as a human. So if you can do that a little bit with spiders and sort of think of them as little creatures who have little lives, who are, doing a little job and have every right to be there. If you really don't want them in your house, instead of killing them, spraying them with some poison or whatever, get somebody to help you scoop it up into a cup and put it outside so it's no longer in your line of sight anymore, but you've given it a chance to go off and find somewhere else to live and continue to live its life and play its very important role in the ecosystem that it's a part of. I think basically it's just about compassion and about extending a little bit more consideration to things that you wouldn't necessarily give a second thought to. So, it's not just like a speck of dirt on the table or whatever other inanimate object that's kicking about that doesn't have feelings or, awareness. It's a living creature and it has a role. And just because you are afraid of it or don't understand it does not mean that you have the right, really, to kill it or to hurt it or do something to it that would stop it from fulfilling that role. It's not fair. And given the state of the planet at the moment, the climate crisis, mass extinctions, everything else, I feel like we should all really be doing whatever little things we can be doing to lessen the impact of that. It might not seem like much to pick a spider up and put it outside rather than step on it, but it's a start. And if you do that more and more and you share that information with your friends and get them doing it too, then you start having that knock-on effect that will hopefully, after a while, actually make an impact, a positive impact. And that's what we want.
Well, T, I do actually have a confession to make. So I really, really wanted to speak to you. And part of the reason why was not just because you're a phenomenal science communicator, is because actually myself, I am arachnophobic. And I really want to learn how to get better acquainted with these little guys. And so I want to thank you because I really feel like this episode has been a huge education, not just professionally, but personally. And I feel truly excited about going to find the little guy who sits upstairs in the bathroom. I'm going to go and I'm going to say hello and I'm not going to be scared.
Good. I'm glad. And you can always hit me up if you need any more pro spider tips, because I got lots of them and I'm all about spreading the pro spider propaganda. That's my whole thing. So
I absolutely will stay in touch and bombard you with all my slightly nervously positioned spider questions. T, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Yes, amazing. Thank you.
I really hope you enjoyed that episode, the first one of the year, with T. Francis, arachnologist, illustrator, taxidermist. I mean, she's just so talented and I urge you to check her out. You can find her on Twitter. Her handle is at @T_Francis. And you can find her on Instagram at scientific. That's spelled SCIENTEAFICC. If you didn't catch that, all of her links are in the show notes. Go and show her some love. And show some spiders some love in your life. If you've been neglecting them like I have, go around your house right now and tell them that they are worthy and they are beautiful. It's great to be back. I can't wait to bring you the future episodes for 2023 with some amazing guests. I'm so excited. Thank you for being here. See you soon.